Hello viewers, welcome to the Black Consciousness Television. Your host Nixon Nikazino, popularly known as Comrade Mao. With me today, your guest is Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao. She's a former AU permanent representative to the US, a medical doctor and expert, the chairperson of the African Diaspora Development Institute, a Pan-Africanist, a philanthropist, you name it, and more so, a family person with her children and a husband. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ambassador Chihombori.
Thank you for having me, and I hope you are keeping home safe and sound and making sure that we continue to move forward as a nation.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy that I'm talking to you both as an African and a Zimbabwean. We're so passionate about both your country and the African continent.
Thank you. We don't have a choice, we have to.
Definitely. Let's get to our business. You are the chairperson of the African Diaspora Development Institute based in the United States, and you're also the chairperson of and CEO of the Bell Family Medical Center, both in the United States, Tennessee, and also here in Zimbabwe. And more so, you have traveled to Malawi and Equatorial Guinea with a team on a needs assessment to deal with the health crisis that bedevils us as Africa. All that work in one person. Tell me, what is really the ADDI all about, and what are its objectives?
Okay. Well, to start with, I'm a medical doctor, and I've been going to Africa and taking my fellow doctors to Africa since the 90s. And I've always had a passion for doing whatever I can as an African to make a difference. I'm grateful for the education that I have, but I also realize that it is a privilege to be given opportunities to participate in and making a difference, whether be it outside the continent or within the continent. But more specifically, when it comes to the continent, we all have a responsibility to play our part. It always saddened me when I started getting statistics, like there are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City than in the entire country of Ghana. There are more Nigerian doctors in Los Angeles than in Nigeria. And the same is true with education, engineering, all kinds of skills that are needed on the continent. They are outside Africa. And we're talking the brain drain of recent years. And then that's before we start talking about the brain drain of over 400 years ago during slavery. So Africa has been bleeding its expertise for centuries. Africa has been bleeding its best for centuries. And to what end? Something has got to give. So I just felt that with what I know as a health professional, I started by mobilizing my friends. It was a simple beginning in the sense that one day I just woke up and said, hey, let me see how many of my friends can come with me to Africa. And within an hour, I'd mobilized over 30 doctors to say, yeah, doc, we'll come with you. And I didn't realize people would have such a response. And then we've been doing it since the 90s. And then, of course, I ended up at the AU mission. Again, another fluke. I wasn't expecting to ever end up as an ambassador. What do I know? I'm a scientist, you know? But I get called, and I really didn't think there was much I could offer. I went there thinking at most I would last 6 months. But when I got there in Washington, the need was huge. There was a need for a voice. And so I stayed. I became the voice. Didn't make everybody happy, but I spoke my truth because I felt that the diaspora was so uninformed. They just didn't know what was really going on in Africa. And I felt it was my responsibility, if the diaspora that are needed to bring, to bridge the gap of the needed skills, if they're going to go to Africa, they must know the truth. The majority of the Africans were very bitter. They thought all their problems had to do with leadership, which I understand. Leadership is key. But if you take the situation that I found quite deplorable, when you look at the French and how they made these 14 African countries sign the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, in which they gave up all their natural resources. They gave up control of their finances through their central bank and bank reserves. They had no control of their military. I was talking to one general who said, Ambassador, we used to have one gun for every 3 soldiers, and yet they're supposed to be fighting terrorists. So as a president, you have no control of your military. You have no control of your finances. You have no control of your natural resources because all your minerals discovered and yet to be discovered belong to France. What are you leading? And what are you leading with? So leadership became problem number 7, 8, 9, and 10. So until you address problem number 1 to 6, nothing you do with problem number 6, 7, and 8 or 10 is going to change anything. So I felt the responsibility to share with the African diaspora, to let them know that they really need to understand Africa. They need to understand the real root causes of why Africa is where it is today. And we need to place the blame and allocate it to where it matters the most. So for those countries who had a French agent at the central bank, a French agent at the foreign ministry, a French representative at the palace, presidential palace, and all the multinationals were siphoning the natural resources out of their countries, it was important that the people understood what was really going on. So if you use an example of Niger taking over its uranium mine, I'm going to use one example, one mineral. By taking over their uranium mine from the French companies, they were able to go from being given 80 cents per kilo for their uranium to realizing over 200 euros per kilo. That was revenue annually that went from 1 billion to over 300 billion. Who needs aid with that kind of money? But all those kind of funds were being bled out of Africa. So I felt very strongly that the African diaspora needed to know the truth. They needed to understand what was really going on. Because when they do, things are really going to change. And that we should stop being thrown a shiny object so we can run in the opposite direction when the real issue is in the opposite direction. So that's my mission. I started doing that at the AU. And when I left, I knew the work that I started, it was not going to be continued, which is exactly what has happened. And so I created ADDI to continue to engage the African diaspora, to continue to let them understand what is really going on in Africa, but at the same time, realizing that when they know what is going on in Africa, they will have a better avenue, a better entry into how they can participate in building the Africa that we want and contribute in whatever way that they can. And also at the same time, creating avenues for them to be able to go back home, whether to leave, whether to repatriate, or to just go and make a difference like I was doing with the doctors, with 2 weeks, be it 1 week, be it 1 month. But everybody must play their part because what is happening in Africa has got to change. And it is going to take us as Black people to change Africa. We can't expect those who exploited us for centuries to change our circumstances at this time. So that's all I'm doing to bring awareness, and hopefully when people are awoken and understand what is really going on in Africa, they can begin to have a strategy and an approach that can also assist them in playing their part in building the Africa that we want.
Quite a mouthful. Quite a mouthful. Now, you know Marcus Garvey, you know our Patrice Lumumba, you know our Julius Nyerere, or the Pan-Africanist, and I can see you've been following their footsteps. Where do you locate your Pan-Africanism in terms of Marcus Garvey, you know, dealing with the diaspora, the way he tried to empower the Blacks, coming up with Black businesses, you know, coming up with, you know, different initiatives, and the Black Star Line ship, whereby you wanted to take back Africans back to Africa. Where do you locate yourself in that kind of you know, narrative and ideology?
I think I just find myself as a mother. What would I want for my children? My passion as a Pan-Africanist, my passion for fairness, regardless of where we are. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. It goes back from Zimbabwe. Growing up in Zimbabwe, I was a teenager when we were waging the guerrilla warfare against the Smith regime. I saw a lot of my fellow classmates, some as young as 14 years old at boarding school, just disappearing to join the guerrilla movement. And as I got older, I started questioning, what was it in these 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, who saw it within themselves that they were going to give up everything to go in this direction towards Mozambique, in this direction towards Zambia, towards Tanzania, to find countries that are favorable and sympathetic to our cause, that they're going to learn how to fight, and they'll come back and fight and defend what is ours. It took a small percentage, in my own humble estimates, maybe not even 5% of Zimbabweans who liberated Zimbabwe. Those were the few who sacrificed everything, gave it all up, including death. Many died at a very young age, but they believed in standing up for something. The good thing is we no longer have to fight. We no longer have to get a gun, but we can fight with our pocketbooks. We can fight with our brains. We can fight by liberating ourselves and having a better appreciation for what is going on in Africa and refuse to be used as instruments of our own self-destruction. So I am coming from that viewpoint to say it's going to take a few. I don't expect everybody to understand what's going on in Africa. If only we can get a critical mass of people who understand what is going on in Africa and are committed enough to say, you know what, we need change. The way things are unacceptable and they cannot continue. How long, as Black people in Africa, as Black people around the world, how long are we going to continue to be treated as second-class citizens? Something has got to give.
Okay. Doctor, from the 26th of October to the 8th of November, I saw on the invite that you'll be one of the high-profile speakers in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. The theme is taking Africa to the world and the world to Africa. Why Burkina Faso? What is your interest to be part and parcel of the panelists in Burkina Faso? And I repeat the question, why Burkina Faso?
Burkina Faso, at this point, in my humble opinion, we have leadership that's basically said enough is enough. When the French were exploiting those 14 African countries to the extent that they did, my brother, you are being given 80 cents per kilo for your uranium. When the French are taking that same uranium and selling it for over 200 euros per kilo, your own uranium is being used to power a third of France's electricity. You cannot buy any military equipment unless you get permission from France. And 9 times out of 10, your request is denied. Your minerals discovered and yet to be discovered, they belong to France. What else can you do? The situation was so bad that can we just continue to be nice and continue to be begging, continue to watch what they're doing and do nothing? They would never tolerate that in their countries. France would never tolerate that for a minute from any country. So the leadership in Burkina Faso, they got up and said, enough is enough. You are out. And they garnered a critical mass of Africans, of critical mass of Burkinabe people who stood up and they stood behind the president and said, something has got to give. We too, our children need to eat. Our children cannot continue to go to bed with empty stomachs while our natural resources are feeding French children. That is the position that we need to take as Africans today, to demand that the world treats us fairly, to demand that what's good for them is also good for us. And if they refuse to do it, then we're going to take the approach that the Sahel nations have taken, because we are simply asking the world to do unto the Africans as they would want it done unto them. And Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, they stood up and said enough is enough. And that is why Burkina Faso, in my humble opinion, President Traore is representing what we have always wanted in an African man. He's representing what we have always wanted in an African leader. A leader who is going to stand up and defend his people for the benefit of giving them a better life, rather than standing back and watching everybody exploit us and do nothing. That is why Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. Tell me, how do you differentiate the two? What we call African democracy and the Western democracy, because we've seen the takeover of, the governments in those, the three states, the coalition of these Sahel states, of the three countries that I've mentioned. So how do you qualify the way it has happened in those three countries vis-a-vis the way it is happening in other countries? Of course, you see already there's going to be a new president in Seychelles, and the president of Madagascar, Rajolina, ran away, and there's a takeover again there. You can see there's about to be another change or transformation in Cameroon. How do you view all those dramatic, seismic shifts that are taking place in the African continent in terms of the democracy that we are beginning to see, realize, and that is emerging?
In my humble opinion, democracy is what works for the people. We cannot use the Western-style democracy and cookie cutter it into every African country. As you can see, the French were not going to leave Africa if things were allowed to stay the way they were. Those who wish to say, well, we can't support the leadership in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali because they took over through a coup. I want to ask all those people to say, where were you when France was committing economic coups by saying all your minerals discovered or yet to be discovered belong to France? That is an economic coup. Where were you when the French were telling the militaries in those former French colonies that you can only buy equipment at the approval of France, and yet at the same time, the same France is funding terrorists in those countries? Where were you when these political coups and military coups were being committed against these countries? I can go on, financial coups. When they were forcing these countries to deposit, initially, it was over 85% of their bank reserves with France. Those are economic coups. To this very day, some of the countries are still depositing around 50 to 60% of their bank reserves with France. Those are economic coups. Serious coups that have taken place for centuries. For how long? Why isn't the world calling out those coups? And then when a young man stands up and says enough is enough, you call that a coup. African Union needs to redefine their definition of a coup. When children of Africa stand up and defend their turf, that is not a coup. That is what any man in their right mind, that is what any leader in their right mind will do to defend their people. So what happened in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, I don't consider them coups. I consider African children standing up and defending their turf like they should, like any other man would, like any other leader would. It is just that simple.
Ambassador, the late Muammar Gaddafi, the former president of Libya, was calling for the United States of Africa, right? I watched one of his speeches at the UN, whereby he was speaking about Africa being given a permanent seat. Do you foresee that dream coming to fruition as the ambassador who has worked with the African Union and who has worked in the United States representing Africans, even those in the diaspora? Do you foresee that happening?
Actually, it could happen very rapidly if only the African leaders would come together. There is really, at this point, there's nothing at the UN for the Africans. African countries are going to the United Nations to validate other people's issues, to vote on other people's issues. There's really nothing at the UN as it stands today. It was not designed to cater to the world at large. It was designed after the Second World War to cater to the reconstruction of Europe. And if I must say, the reconstruction of Europe, yes, the United States gave Europe about $13 billion back then, which is now maybe the estimate is about 175 billion present day. But you cannot build Europe with $13 billion. The rest of the rebuilding of Europe came from the exploitation of Africa and other developing nations. So the World Bank, IMF, United Nations, Those institutions were created after the Second World War for the benefit of the rebuilding of Europe after Europe had destroyed itself with what they call First and Second World War. Those were not wars, world wars. Those were European tribal wars like they always have been fighting. The Europeans have been fighting themselves for centuries, but they turned around and started exploiting other developing nations to rebuild themselves. So let's be clear. United Nations was built for the sole purpose of rebuilding Europe. It was never designed to cater to the world at large. The present-day United Nations is an institution that is outdated. That is why I would kind of agree with President Trump when he wants to move he wants America out of the United Nations, because we need a new reformed United Nations that truly represents the rest of the world. The current United Nations does not represent the rest of the world. We need a reformed United Nations. Now, if all the African leaders were to come together, speak with one voice, and say, there is nothing for us at the United Nations, we're out. And they don't just show up for those meetings. They will create a seat for Africa. Africa is the largest voting bloc at the United Nations, and yet they don't have a seat at the table. It's a joke. So why do African leaders go to the United Nations year in and year out? They should not go. But if they come together and speak with one voice, Africa has a very strong voice at the United Nations, but they have to unite it. Wherein lies the problem.
Ambassador, your comment on the executive order signed by President Trump to banish and stop any aid to Africa using the USAID as an arm or an agency for the United States of America. Just your comment.
I agree with him fully. In fact, it was one of the best things he could have done for Africa. Africa does not need aid. Africa does not need the USAID. USAID, when you look at the amount of monies that USAID was given, a very minuscule percentage ended up going to the countries. When I did the interview with Al Jazeera, one of the African ambassadors called me and said, Ambassador, my country was allocated 600 million. He said, we got 20 million. What percentage is that? On the books, the country is supposed to have received 600 million. What happened to the rest? They got about 20 million. That's about 3 to 4%. So this USAID, those funds were being used for other purposes and not what they were intentionally or initially supposed to be given for. So United Nations, USAID was, like I said in my interview, a wolf in sheep's clothing. They came in, they were using their entry into countries for regime change. They were funding opposition constantly. They were tracking activities within the country. They would always position themselves in some of the most remote parts of Africa. And usually, you never see their activities in areas that were not rich in minerals, that were not beneficial to some activity of some sort, be it a constituency that wanted to make sure that they influence regime change. There was always an ulterior motive. What they did was not designed to benefit the country. Theirs were to say, we are working with the government to improve education. We are working with the government to improve healthcare, social services. Show me one country whose educational system improved because USAID was there. Show me one country whose healthcare, social services improved because USAID was there. They were giving us a Band-Aid. If they can just stop messing with the governments, messing with the local politics, allow the Africans to fight themselves on an equal basis without outside interference, let us learn just the same way that the United States learned. They had their own civil war and they dogged it out. And eventually they came up with their solution. Let Africans fight it out and let Africans come up with their own solutions to benefit their own people. But with outside interference, you will never get a true picture of what is really happening in any African country. And that is a serious problem for Africa because our efforts to develop are going to continuously and always be undermined by NGOs like the USAID. So I agree with President Trump fully USAID needed to get out of Africa, allow the Africans to mind their own business. I welcome President Trump talking about fair trade, going to African countries and saying, let's trade. Now, when we begin to trade with the United States, if we go to the negotiating table and the Africans don't put their best negotiators and they end up with a bad deal, then the joke is on the Africans. But at least being able to say our minerals and acknowledging that Africa's natural resources belong to the Africans. And for the Americans, the Europeans to say, you have something that we want, and we have something that you want. Now let's come to the table and trade. Isn't that the way things were? Even back as we were the African tribes, people were trading. And that's really all we are asking for. Trade with Africa and trade with Africa fairly. Africans, don't be stupid. When you come to the negotiating table, do not accept brown envelopes. Trade and negotiate in all honesty for the betterment of your people and not to allow ourselves to be exploited. So when countries come to Africa and they want to negotiate in good faith, we too must come in and truly represent our people. Continued exploitation of Africa has got to end. It's no longer going to work. Times have changed. It's a new era. Africa must benefit from her own natural resources for the benefit of her people. Plain and simple, just like other nations do. We are not asking for anything more or anything less. Trade with Africa fairly. The exploitation of the African continent has got to come to an end. And African leaders need to stand up and say enough is enough. They need to defend African citizens and use our natural resources to improve the lives of Africans around the continent.
Finally, Ambassador, your last word. What should Africans in the diaspora do to engineer a collective agenda on development?
What I find the biggest problem with Africans in general, be it Africans in the diaspora or Africans on the continent, we still have a lot of waking up to do. We are still suffering from the legacy of slavery, legacy of colonization. A lot of us, I often say, we're not just homesick. We're not sick in the doctor's office. We're not sick in the hospital regular ward. We're sick in the intensive care. This issue of being brainwashed, it is huge, my brother. I share a story of my own niece who works at a hospital. She's a nurse. And she walked into a conference room. They were getting ready to have a hospital meeting. She took the last seat on the front row. But just as she was sitting down, another nurse, same level as her, happened to walk through. And without thinking like a fool, she knew she had taken the last seat. She got up and was going to let the white nurse take that seat. But as she was walking away, she thought about me, her aunt. She said, oh my God, if my aunt is here, she's going to kill me. So she ran back and got her seat before the nurse could take it over. And while she was sitting in that seat, she started questioning herself. She said, if this nurse was a black nurse, it never would have occurred to her to give up her seat. But because it was a white nurse, because she's pre-programmed, our minds, we're on automatic pilot of stupidity. We have to constantly check ourselves and our behavior. So after the meeting, she said she was so mad at herself, and she remembered the conversation that she had with me. So she called me and she said, Auntie, you were right. I am colonized. Because before she used to say, no, I don't have that problem, Auntie. You talk too much. She said, Auntie, I have a problem. I have the disease. So what do I do to get rid of this disease? To which I said, welcome, my dear daughter. You have graduated from Decolonization 101. Now let's enroll you into Decolonization 102, where you now have to continuously check yourself and recheck yourself and recheck yourself. Africans go to the negotiating table, automatically they feel inferior. They're automatically defeated even before the game begins. It is the mind that we were defeated. It's the mind where it matters the most. And we must realize that we are sick and we need healing. But it is an individual decision. It is an individual commitment. We must urge each and every one of us to have a serious conversation with the image in the mirror. What happened in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, it was a group of people who were awoken, who simply said, what is right is right. And they are willing to stand up for that truth. They are willing to stand up for those facts that will not change. Truth will not change. Facts that are truthful will not change. And so why can't we stand for that? That is the kind of mentality that is needed, because the mentality that's going to be swayed, it is the mentality that's going to be used as instruments of our own self-destruction. I was at an event, and one of my brothers from Nigeria walked up to me and said, well, Ambassador, I don't know about you and all this Pan-African thing. I will never work with black people. White people don't lie. I'm not kidding you. This brother from Nigeria said to me, he will only work with white people because white people don't lie. I said, which world are you living in, my son? But that's his mentality. And this was a college professor who believes like that. And we have too many Africans who feel that way. Wherein lies the problem. If Africans could wake up, if Africans can understand that you got to defend yourself just like everybody else, until we get to that point and we have a critical mass who believe in what we must do, that we don't have to love each other, we don't have to like each other, but at some point we need to realize that we are riding this sinking Titanic. And it doesn't matter if you change, since while we are riding a sinking Titanic, we are all going down. So the sooner we come together and speak with one voice, when it comes to issues to do with Africa, we must stick together like super. But unfortunately, we get so divided. You attend meetings. During breaks, the Chinese will start caucusing on their own. The white people will caucus on their own. The Mexicans, the Indians. And guess what Africans are doing? They're busy trying to attach themselves with the Chinese. They're busy trying to attach. Why can't we caucus on our own and come up with an African common position? And come up with a position that says, yes, as Africans, as black people, this is what we stand for, and this is what we are going to demand, and we are going to stick together and speak with one voice, whether I like you or not. But on this issue, we must stick together like super glue. We are totally incapable of doing that as black people. And to me, that is the biggest disease that we're having to deal with. We were defeated where it matters the most, which is the mind. We need healing.
Thank you. You have heard it. That was Dr. Arikana, Ambassador Chihombori-Quao. Quite mouthful, honest, educative, from an honest Pan-Africanist. Thank you, Dr. Ambassador Chihombori, for taking your time to be part and parcel and to be a guest on our Pan-Africanist Black Consciousness television. We hope to invite you next time so that you can share a lot in terms of Black consciousness, but also after your journey to Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, what your take-home points and what you think Africa can improve from the experiences you are going to have in Burkina Faso. Once again, thank you, Dr. Ambassador Arikana Chihombori-Quao.
Yeah. Thank you, my brother. Keep up the good work. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. And we are also giving us the voices, giving us the space to continue to communicate and dialogue. And your platform is very important. I hope you continue to grow and your outreach continues to improve. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Viewers, you have heard it from our own ambassador, former AU permanent representative to the United States, and a Pan-Africanist. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, our third episode. For any information, please visit our screen for our social media handles, and also for those who are interested in buying the Black Consciousness wares, you can also see the information and details on the screen. Enjoy yourselves and see you next time. Bye-bye. Ciao.